Hi there. I want to comment on a clip from an interview that Jordan Peterson just did with English author Matt Ridley. And in this interview, Matt Ridley talks about his latest book, How Innovation Works, which ascribes progress, of course, to technological innovation. And in the clip, which I will link to, Jordan Peterson reads this passage from Ridley's book that illustrates two interpretations of the same scene of a family from about 1800. The first interpretation is romantic, and the second is dark. In the first scene, the family is around the hearth, and it's very harmonious, and the baby is being nursed, and a bird is singing outside, and the father is reading to everyone from the Bible. In the second interpretation, the smoke from the hearth will end up killing the father prematurely, and the family has to get by with just a few pieces of clothing, and the daughter will become pregnant, and her child will be sent to an orphanage, and they have lice, etc. The point is, the good old days, that they were awful, which is the title of a book I read long ago that does the same ideal busting exercise with just about everything 19th century. Sort of like Dickens, really. The point is that the educated, affluent people who believe the first scenario, who don't experience want and physical hardship, tend to romanticize the past, even the near past. But the fact is that the technology that they eschew, that they disdain, has made things better for everyone all over the world. So I just read an article in the science magazine, The New Atlantis, and the title of the article is Why We Need a Technological Environmentalism. And it follows similar lines to this clip from Jordan Peterson. But it talks about the area of technology that helps people and the environment at the same time, or how technology can help people and the environment at the same time, certain technologies. And it's basically a review of journalist Michael Shellenberger's book, Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. And here's a quote from the article. In the 1800s, Europeans and Americans killed tens of thousands of whales and hundreds of thousands of elephants every year to produce whale oil for lantern fuel and bone and ivory for innumerable objects ranging from combs and chess pieces to billiard balls and piano keys. But the petroleum industry helped to reduce these slaughters by replacing whale oil with kerosene and ivory with plastics. So the natural was saved by embracing the artificial. So Shellenberger's known for his support of Generation 4 nuclear energy, which is supposedly almost completely safe and recycles the waste instead of dumping it. Shellenberger also thinks technology can solve ecological and environmental problems better than what he calls the apocalyptic environmentalist's approach, which is something like going back to 1800, which is something like living as much like that as possible, reducing your carbon footprint, etc. But of course, these environmentalists, being more educated than the working class ilk, the type that enter this club, this cult, he kind of thinks it is, the apocalyptic environmentalists certainly envision scenario one. And here's another quote from the book. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, green romantics adopted the slogan "Split wood, not atoms," in response to nuclear engineering students, of whom I was one at the time, offered the bumper sticker, "Save a tree, split an atom." From the point of view of environmental science, the latter was unquestionably correct. The energy contained in a ton of uranium can replace that produced by burning millions of trees with vastly less pollution, and do so without using resources that would be used by the natural biosphere. So with that in mind, we now bring Pirsig in on the issue. What he has to say is another way of voicing exactly the same observation. It's sometimes argued that there's no real progress, that a civilization that kills multitudes in mass warfare, that pollutes the land and oceans with ever larger quantities of debris and destroys the dignity of individuals by subjecting them to a forced mechanized existence, can hardly be called an advance over the simpler hunting and gathering and agricultural existence of prehistoric times. But here, of course, Pirsig reflects what Ridley and Shellenberger are both saying, that there is an overly romantic Rousseauian notion of what the pre-industrial past was like. And of course, those of you who have read Pirsig know that in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Sylvie and John represent this point of view. And they fear technology, they want to escape it. You go into their house, there's no picture. They have all these paintings that are all figurative and landscape, and they just try to deny technology as much as possible to the point where they'd rather live with a dripping faucet than figure out how to fix it. But this argument, though romantically appealing, doesn't hold up. The primitive tribes permitted far less individual freedom than does modern society. Ancient wars were committed with far less moral justification than modern ones. A technology that produces debris can find, and is finding, ways of disposing of it without ecological upset. So here it's interesting that Pirsig points out directly that it is the technology itself that provides the answers to the environmental problems caused by technology rather than the abandonment of technology altogether. And a lot of course, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance is about reconciling technology with humanity in a high-quality way. Schoolbert pictures of primitive man sometimes omit some of the detractions of his primitive life. The pain, the disease, famine, the hard labor needed just to stay alive. From that agony of bare existence to modern life can be soberly described only as upward progress, and the sole agent for this progress is quite clearly reason itself. We're talking about reason here because this is, as we know in Zen of the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the reconciliation with technology is how to figure out how to proceed with technology that's not completely dominated by reason, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So everyone in this dialogue is anti-Malthusian, which is roughly the doctrine that humanity is a cancer upon the globe. And they agree that we do need to embrace technology for progress. However, we also need to address, and this is something we all know, we do need to address and handle the dark side of technology. Sylvia and John are right about certain things. The romantics are right about certain things. So this is just addressing not just the environmental dark side, but the fact that it does indeed destroy the dignity sometimes of human beings, and certainly the attention span and mental health of many people, plus the toll it takes on our social life and our physical well-being. So certainly the internet is way, way worse than the TV that Pirsig had to contend with at his time. And one of the problems is that the movement that spawned technology, the Enlightenment, also, of course, ended up killing God, or at least reducing him to a former shadow of himself, a shadow on the cave wall, as Nietzsche said. And that leaves us bereft of our natural seeking for something transcendent. And then we seek something to fill the void. And besides Nietzsche, many such as Jordan Peterson have remarked upon this, following Nietzsche's lead. I mean, Nietzsche has, is the master of this understanding, but many people see it now and agree with it. Peterson, in this corner, certainly, this is the contention of John Vervaeke and Jonathan Pageau. That's a big part of their model of understanding reality and addressing the problems in reality, is that there needs to be something to fill this void. For Vervaeke, of course, it's he's working on it, and for Pageau, it's getting back to actually to God. So Shellenberger thinks that this void is being filled by the worship of nature, and that worship of nature itself is the new God. And now, for the environmental zealots, this worship of nature and this disdain of technology and of mankind fulfills the transcendent purpose that was once met by religion. Shellenberger doesn't think this zeal can be countered with a rational approach to environmentalism. For example, you can't tell them it's obvious that safe nuclear energy is way better than populating the entire countryside with wind turbines that are inefficient and kill birds, because this transcendent pseudo-religious understanding does address the need for transcendent purpose. And also baked into this transcendent narrative is this wind is good, it's natural, it's godly, and nuclear is bad, and radiation and apocalypse. Therefore, in order to be able to sell environmentalism in an effective way, it needs to be packaged with the ideals of secular humanism, and that the highest purpose is something like human betterment. So he argues for a new environmental humanism, since it's built into Shellenberger's and many theorists' belief that the return to religion is just as unrealistic as returning to living like it's 1800. So he says, as such, we need to go beyond rationalism and re-embrace humanism, which affirms humankind's specialness, against Malthusian and apocalyptic environmentalists who condemn human civilization, humanity itself. As environmental humanists, whether scientists, journalists, or activists, we must ground ourselves first in our commitment to the transcendent moral purpose of universal human flourishing and environmental progress, and the emphasis is his, or is in the article, and then irrationality. So what Shellenberger is saying is that a rational approach to environmentalism is not going to save us from the cult of apocalyptic environmentalism, because the latter actually takes into account or even emerges as a result of this unmet need for meaning and transcendence that the rational approach ignores. And this is where my argument comes in. Okay, so I agree that the rational approach ignores this. Certainly Pirsig agrees that the rational approach ignores this. But my problem with this is human flourishing, which Shellenberger points to as what we're aiming for with this technology. Is that something important enough that it can replace God? And I say it's not. I say that even though he's on the right track and that this need for God must be met, you have to meet that need with something like God, not some Enlightenment ideal of human flourishing. And that's what this is. This is an Enlightenment ideal which supplanted God with a rational idea. So while Shellenberger sees this as a transcendent ideal, I argue it's not. It is the kind of transcendence, again, that guided the Enlightenment. And remember, rationality seemed transcendent too, and it was at the time until needs were met, and now it's kind of sticking around a little bit too authoritarian, really, a little bit too populating our whole way of understanding, which is, of course, the whole contention of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, is this leftover, rational, dualistic, subject-object way of understanding reality is outdated, and it's causing problems. So if not an actual medieval God to fill the void, what is the God of the future going to look like? Well, Pirsig believes that an entirely different metaphysical understanding should transform our mythos. And our mythos is that whole layering of all the myths and all the cultural patterns of history that we live in. For example, in the West, we live in a Judeo-Christian mythos, which is heavily influenced by the ancient Greeks. And so we need to transform our mythos so that what we are reversing is not technology itself, but the Church of Reason, Pirsig calls. The Church of Reason that led to this kind of fragmentation that we see that seems to be caused by technology, but really is caused by reason, which is really fragmenting everything into categories and continuing to do so until there's such a fragmentation that we're really lost and it's chaotic. Pirsig finds, again, the origin of this problem in ancient Greece, when Socrates argued and won that truth should take the highest place on the hierarchy of our perception of reality, and good will be below that. And let's see for a moment what Pirsig says about the good. In the area of religion, the rational relationship of quality to the Godhead needs to be more thoroughly established, and this I hope to do better later on. For the time being, one can meditate on the fact that the old English roots for the Buddha and quality, God and good, appear to be identical. So while Pirsig is not yet able to tell us that the good, quality, and God are the same, he is certainly implying something like that. And I would argue that quality is more transcendent, closer to God, than a noble but earthly idea of human flourishing. So while Shellenberger is certainly on the right track, he's missing the mark on this one. So now I'd like to go a little into what Pirsig sees as the problem and solution of technology. So the problem is kind of a non-coalescence between reason and feeling. What's wrong with technology is that it's not connected in any real way with matters of the spirit and of the heart. And so it does blind, ugly things quite by accident and gets hated for that. People haven't paid much attention to this before because the big concern has been with food, clothing, and shelter for everyone, and technology has provided these. Technology based on pure dualistic reason has also been condemned because it obtains these material advantages by turning the world into a stylized garbage dump. Now's the time to stop condemning things and come up with some answers. So then what needs to be at the top of the hierarchy of our understanding of reality? So if it can't be God anymore, then maybe also it shouldn't be human flourishing, which is a very intellectual category, and by that definition is not truly transcendent. It is still dualistic. It's not dynamic enough. So for Pirsig, the answer is quality, a completely dynamic, non-dual force of creation of the universe. So how would you use quality, or how would you proceed with quality at the top of the hierarchy? Well, a way to do this that Pirsig suggests is to allow passion and emotion to guide technological innovation. According to Pirsig, the emotions are the central part of understanding. First, we know what's good. Emotions tell us what's good, what is high quality, what's low quality to avoid, what's high quality to pursue. And then we develop what we need from there. And this is pure quality. This isn't quality driven by some other thing, by money, by profit, by efficiency, even by human flourishing. Human flourishing is an after effect of the perception of quality. The Enlightenment solidified Socrates and Aristotle's call for the truth over emotion, thus relegating the emotions to the back burner so we could presumably be objective and proceed from there. This is what is now causing the problem. The main driving force should not just be efficiency or profit, but just as much a harmony between man and his environment, a higher quality direction. In fact, this harmony should be the guiding force, and this harmony, again, is what you sense with your emotions that is the highest quality. It's going to feel harmonious. This is why quality has been compared in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance with Tao. And these patterns of efficiency and profit, which of course have been established as ways to continue progress, maybe should be more secondary concerns. And this means human priority must shift from something like mammon to something like God and go from there. In order to survive, Pirsig says, we needed to free the emotions and examine the material world so we could master it and develop technologies to promote this human flourishing, which as an intellectual and practical notion is extremely important. But now the separation of emotion and separation from nature has gone too far, and technology is in the service of the efficient, the rational, but not the good. It's like doing what's reasonable rather than what's good. So it's time to bring back the good, to bring back quality. Here's a very famous quote from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. The Buddha, the Godhead, resides quite as comfortably in the circuits of a digital computer or the gears of a cycle transmission as he does at the top of a mountain or in the petals of a flower. To think otherwise is to mean the Buddha, which is to demean oneself. And that's because we have in us, let's just say, a rational mechanism. It's our classic aspect. We also have an intuitive, holistic, romantic aspect to us. If you want to look at McGilchrist's left and right hemisphere, there's sort of a parallel in there if you want to look at it that way. Of course, it's problematic to reduce things to brain science, but McGilchrist doesn't actually do that. So it's a nice paradigm as a parallel. So both need to work in harmony, so you can't dismiss the rational part. And Pirsig suggested a new spiritual rationality, he called it, in which rationality becomes second to emotion. Quality first, and then the rationality to implement it. And you can find much about his theory of how these technological problems happened and how to fix them in the book, and a long discussion about low quality and high quality technology. But there's a caveat. This is a transformation of consciousness, and as such, the transformation must occur on the level of the individual. Pirsig's theory is one thing, but it has to be implemented. So I leave you with this final quote that reflects also Jordan Peterson's contention. My personal feeling is that this is how any further improvement of the world will be done, by individuals making quality decisions, and that's all. So I hope that made sense, and I'll see you next time.